Dr. Felix Ndahinda is an academic researcher focused on conflict, peace and justice in the Great Lakes region. As you've just seen, the fighting in the eastern end of the Democratic Republic of Congo is very far from over. When we spoke some hours ago, I asked him if that peace deal could really work without a neutral external military force in the region to enforce it.
To be honest, I have my doubts, simply because that model already is meant to be functioning in the DRC. We have MONUSCO, which has been there for 20 years, which was instituted after more or less similar in different circumstances accord, which is the Pretoria Accord. From the Lusaka time already was deployed, the predecessor of MONUSCO. So we have had forces of intervention which are meant to be deployed in the DRC, some of the biggest at a given time in the world, to implement such kind of accord. But it never still stopped violence in the DRC, it never stopped recurrence, it never stopped, it never brought stability. And my argument in those really in the different pieces I have been writing really point to the fact that many of the connection between different actors, the willingness really to go to the depth of the different issues that are at stake, both at the local, national, and in regional level, even international level, the absence of the interconnection of let's say comprehensive, sometimes these words are used as buzzwords, but comprehensive and holistic approach to the conflict. The absence of that has always led to partial intervention, dealing with very specific timely issues without looking at the problem as a whole.
Based on what you saw, did it surprise you that M23 was not at the table? Because it seems, as an outsider, individuals who look at this and say, hang on a minute, if the argument that we're hearing is that M23 has seized territory in South Kivu, North Kivu, and then we look at the Washington Accords and we see the heads of state from Rwanda and the DRC signing an accord, but we see no representation from the M23, it looks odd, it looks incomplete. Is that the same perspective that you had?
In a way, but I'm mindful of the fact that a different process dealt with that factor, which is the Doha process. So in a way, there's a Doha process which addresses the contentious issues between M23 and the Congolese government, which is considered the internal Congolese dimension of the issue. And Washington was more considering at the interstate dimension of the problem. My argument has been that since the dynamics of conflict have always, in a way, connected both the local and the interstate dimensions, somehow there is a need to bring those together in comprehensive accords in order to make sure that the interconnectedness of those issues is addressed. That's one. And at the same time, the implementation as well looks at both sides, or rather the multi-layered sides of the issues, the local, the regional, and the international dimensions of the conflict in the DRC. So the argument I'm making basically is that, yes, Washington addresses one dimension, but I'm not sure whether I'm always convinced with the argument that you need to keep them separate.
I want to speak to some of the economic issues at play here, because one of the things that we keep seeing, especially with respect to the eastern end of the DRC, is this mineral play, right? Groups will essentially seize territory and then either impose taxes or try and make money off mineral revenues coming out of there. Pretty much the same story that we're seeing now with M23. Purely as an economic problem, what incentive would they have to give up control of those assets, control of that cash flow, and then to disarm? Because without that, we're not going to get to comprehensive peace in the region and address the social and economic issues that also are part of this conflict.
Since the conflict started in the DRC, different actors, of course, have always used minerals as tools that also perpetuate the dynamics of conflict. There is no question about that. That being said, also there is an increasing recognition, especially in some academic literature, that the narrative about the conflict as a source of conflict is sometimes overplayed. Definitely minerals do play a role in the conflicts, but they are and have never been really the main source of the conflict. There have been grievances about governance in the DRC for many years. There have been issues of inclusion in Eastern DRC of all different population and groups and individual rights, and enforcement of that. The access to equal citizenship and all of that, especially which are part of, and return of refugees, which we find in the Doha process as part of the main, for example, talking points of the M23. So I have always been convinced that if you address many of the issues that, for example, were discussed in Doha in terms of the internal issues, and many of the issues that have been discussed in Washington issues in a comprehensive way, and really there is some real will to implement these arguments, I would be convinced that the minerals issue can be dealt with. Also, of course, because after all, the Congolese state, governance in the Congo, has to organize that, has to be able to govern around both exploitation and use, who has access and so on, and commercialization, and more importantly, how that benefits the whole population.